and we will cover walls, doors, and windows inside of Revit. Okay, so I'm just going to go to my level 1 floor plan, and I'm going to work a little bit to the side on this so that we're not worrying about, the exact replication right now. Let's just start with the basics. So underneath the wall tool, under architecture, the architecture tab, wall, that immediately swaps this property panel out to wall properties, and I have a basic list of wall types. Okay, so if I've started with the architectural template, I will have this basic grouping. And there are multiple ways to do walls. For starters, these are complicated walls. They have multiple layers. They have an outer layer, like this one is an outer layer of brick with an airspace and CMU and then metal studs on the inside. Okay, and those are awesome, super cool wall types, right? You can build up a lot of complexity in these so that when you cut a section or if you're doing material takeoffs, those kind of things, that complexity exists and it's right there, okay? It's also a lot to manage. So when you are learning Revit, so basically your entire academic career, I'm going to suggest to you not to use any of these complex wall types or be building any of those complex wall types. Keep it simple. Okay, let's keep it simple so that you can focus not on managing all of this stuff, but so that you can focus on your design. So almost always, in terms of the academic environment, and really I would say more than half of the professional projects I model in Revit, I am starting with this generic wall type, right? I am working on any of these generic wall types, right? So a generic 8-inch thick wall, a really good place to start, okay? So if I've got the generic 8-inch wall selected, you'll notice it is going to draw center lines. So I'm just left-clicking and drawing. And you can see it's piecing all that stuff together. I've got different ways that I can draw squares, boxes, shapes. In particular, you'll find yourself on occasion using arcs. And it's going to stitch all of those together. Okay, usually when you're drawing walls, you're drawing them in a two-dimensional plan view. As you are drawing walls, if I select any of the walls and look at them, you'll notice it is drawing by the wall center line. My base constraint is the level that I'm on, so the base constraint was level 1. No offset from the base constraint. So again, it's putting the bottom of the wall on level 1. Its top is not connected to anything, and it's 20 feet tall. Right? So as I'm drawing, that's what's being constructed. So if I look at it in 3D, I have a series of walls. Bottom of the wall is on level 1, top of the wall is 20 feet tall. Okay? So it's pretty simple conceptually. However, those defaults are really not what we use very often, right? Because an 8-inch wall, like a standard 8-inch wall, even concrete block that we call an 8-inch block, it's 7 5/8, right? And those dimensions matter, okay? So let's get a little bit more precise and let's build sort of our own wall type. Let's draw it the way that it needs to be defined. And let's give it a base constraint and a top constraint. Okay? So I'm going to go back to level 1. And I'm going to go back to wall. And let's build a new wall type based off of this generic 8-inch. So if we look at Cliff House. Let's see here. Let's see if we can find an interior image. Okay, there's an interior image. So that has a wood stud wall, and I'm guessing that is an interior finish, because I would certainly think that there's some insulation and stuff in there someplace. But I'm not sure. That might be a rigid insulation along the exterior. I really don't know exactly how that's been finished. But let's just assume, for the sake of local construction, that would be a wood stud wall. So typical framing for a wood stud wall is a 2x6, right? So the actual size of a 2x6 is how many inches by how many inches? because it's not 2 inches by 6 inches.
Isn't it 1.5 by 5.5?
1.5 by 5.5. Yep, it's 1.5 inches by 5.5 inches. So if we set something up in Revit, I would want to go, let's go to Edit Type. We're going to change the structure. The structures we're saying how big that wall is. So I'm going to go Edit. If you notice, we also have our material right here. We'll worry about that later. But let's just set up our thickness to 5.5 inches. And say, okay. Because I've done that, this is now, this is named generic 8-inch. That's probably not the best name for a wall that's 5.5 inches. So let's go ahead and rename that to a 5.5 inch wood frame. And I could have done the same thing. I could have duplicated that first. Probably should have duplicated that first, so I didn't overwrite the generic 8-inch wall. But that is now a 5.5-inch wood frame wall. So let's start with that. I'm going to go back and make one more edit in this, but I do want to look at how that's going to draw out, okay? So let's click the OK button. And let's go back to, we're still on our wall drawing tool, and let's look at how this is drawn, okay? So don't follow along with the clicks here for just a second. But when I'm drawing something, if I'm working on interior walls, something like that, I might want to draw by center line. Okay, but if I look at how, and this is like, I find myself doing this more times than not. I have something kind of sketched out for where my building needs to sit. And if I'm drawing this with a center line, you can see rather than going to the outside edge of that platform, it's drawing center line. So I rarely use that center line as my location for drawing. Typically what I'm going to set this to is finished face exterior. Because now when I'm drawing, it's going to draw the outside edge of my line. Okay, if you remember when we started building this project, we were building based off of our estimated exterior dimensions, and dimensions really matter in the software, okay? So given that, drawing with exterior edge is a much easier process. Again, and I can come in and just type in whatever dimensions I need to as I'm drawing. But usually working with the exterior is really, really helpful to me, right? You'll each sort of learn, okay, how you want to work, but that's the mode, to me, that sort of works the best, right? So all of the editing tools, the modify tools, work exactly the same way on walls that they were on lines. So if I have a gap right here, I can come in and trim that together. If I click on one wall, it's going to give me a temporary dimension that's showing me where that wall is at. And if you notice, it is doing center line of wall again, but I can reprogram that. Oh, I should be able to reprogram that. Well, let's not use the temporaries. Let's go ahead and let's put in annotate, and let's do a dimension. Annotate an aligned dimension. Okay, so I want you to put an aligned dimension in, outside edge to outside edge of walls. So again, if you'll notice, it's going to default to wall center line. I'm going to ask you to switch this to wall faces. So wall faces allows me to select outside edge and outside edge. So I'm clicking outside edge to outside edge, and then I'm clicking a third time to place where I want that dimension at. Okay, so you should have on your screen, go ahead and drop in a series of walls. Then you're going to go to annotate an aligned dimension, change how you're placing the dimension to wall faces, and then you're going to run outside edge to outside edge. I want to get everybody to that point. And then I want to talk just really briefly, conceptually, why those are important standards that we use here regionally. Okay, because if you go someplace outside of our region, you might want to do this a slightly different way. But here regionally, our contractors, the people that are going to be building your designs, most of them loathe centerline dimensions. Okay? So let's think about why. If you are out in the field and what you have been provided is aligned wall center lines, this to this, and it's placed here. How do I place this wall and this wall if I'm in the field? A lot of you have done some design build stuff. How do you place those walls? How do you figure them out? It's not rhetorical. It's pretty simple. You take a tape measure, right? You've got your floor base. You've got something. You're tape measuring that out. The dimension you're given is centerline to centerline. If it's a 5.5 inch thick stud wall, wood stud wall, so it's 2x6 framing, how much do I need to add to each side so that I actually get the location of my walls? Because I can't really eyeball the center of a base stud, right? I need the edges of something. Okay, so using something like an 8 foot 6.5 inch centerline to centerline is dramatically not useful in the field, because they're constantly having to pull out something and add your 2.25 inch by 2.25 inch in each direction. So now I've got 8'6" plus 2.25 inches to get my 5.5 inches, or I guess it's cheat. See, I already did it wrong. It's 2.75 inch, right? So if you want to create lots of problems in the field, that's what you do, right? You don't actually, and also, this goes back to the other reason, professionally speaking, so don't draw this in really quick, but professionally speaking, why I often don't do these more complicated walls. So that is a brick wall with CMU. Okay, so if I dimension this, so if I go annotate, align dimension, and I'm doing center line of this wall, I mean the center line of that wall isn't even an actual center line of the concrete block. So if I switch this to wall face, that makes more sense. So I can go wall face to wall face and get 10.6. But in something like this, what gets built first here is the concrete block. And I haven't given the dimensions to the concrete block. I've given the dimensions to the brick that's outside of the concrete block, which if you're watching across the street is one of the last things built on the exterior. So again, I'm providing somewhat useless information to those in the field trying to build our work. Okay, which is why, professionally speaking, what I'm usually doing is I am modeling the core structure, and I am dimensioning to the core structure so that those working in the field have the dimensions specifically to what they're working on. Okay? Kind of with me? I mean, I know I'm skipping ahead 3 or 4 years in terms of what you're knowing and how you're thinking about how what we do translates to the field. But it is important that you start to understand conceptually. That's why I'm teaching you how to model these things in Revit the way that I am. Okay? So, let's get rid of that. And let's look at how we can use a dimension. Let's get rid of that because it's exactly what I don't want you to do. If I have a dimension string, or if I have a temporary dimension set up, I can select that wall. And if I needed this out to be exactly 20 feet, I can use this dimension string to push that wall around. So I can select that wall. I can select my 18 feet, 7 1/16 of an inch, and change that number to 20. When I hit enter, it's going to push that wall over to 20 feet. Which is super handy. If you guys think about the amount of time that you spend in studio trying to get those things right and then erasing and rewriting, it's a little bit of a difficult task to do. Okay, the other thing that I want to show you in terms of how dimensions work. So dimensions here aren't sort of an artifact. They aren't something you do once you're done. You put dimensions in so you can continue to push and pull things around as a design tool, right? By the same token, if I'm under Annotate and I select the Room Tag button, so make sure that you have a group of walls that are creating a closed-in area for me, okay? Once you have a group of walls and a closed-in area, I want you to click Room Tag, and I want you to place a room tag. What did that just do for me? Room tag? Wow. Is anybody's room tag working?
I think you might have to have a floor.
Shouldn't have to have a floor. That would be new. Annotate. Oh, I'm not room tag. I want room this second. Just a second. I'm having a brain meltdown here. Architecture. Sorry, room. It's been a minute. Architecture, room. The room tag just assigns, if you already have a room established, it's going to put a tag there. The room tool does both. It identifies the area and places a tag at the same time. That's what we want, right? So we're under architecture, room, and left click inside of your space. Okay, so that's given you a room tag and it's identified the room. Okay, so it's identified the perimeter. If I select what is the room tag, underneath my properties, okay, so I'm going to go to room, so there's room tag. I can go to edit type and I can turn on area. Okay, so you guys are getting ready to go into some pretty hefty programming assignments in Studio where you are defining and editing a lot of square footage. Again, I'm not going to tell you to use Revit to complete your design this semester. I think that's a bad idea. But to help you complete some programming assignments, if I turn on room area, I now know that that space is 307 square feet. And I know if I move that wall around, it's going to automatically update my square footage based on the enclosure of that space, which is really handy when you're given a list of quantities to start defining and seeing how they're going to work. So going from your organizational bubble diagram to your spatial diagram, where you're actually getting your, close to precise numbers of square footage to see how this plays out, super, super important thing. But then my next step usually is file print, and I start designing over the top of that with these things in relative size to each other. Cool, so dimensions and room tags are active living things in this software, right? It's part of BIM, right? All these things know what they are. It knows it's a room, it knows it's a space, it knows it has a volume. We didn't turn on the volume, but it's there as well. And it knows it has a surface area, square footage. Cool? So that's all the stuff that walls are going to start to do. So let's look really quickly. I'm going to go to 3D. And let's start editing this wall, this group of walls, to behave more like we want them to as well. So the first thing I had left on these was the default height of 20 feet. So if I select any one of these walls, it's going to show up as unconnected 20 feet tall. So I can do a simple vertical edit. I can just say that's 10. I can just type in a new number and it's going to shrink the wall down for me. So I can push and pull the top of the wall that way. But that's totally the newbie kind of Revit uneducated way to approach wall heights. Okay, a better way to approach wall height is to start connecting the tops of your walls to something, right? So if I look at my elevation view, right now I have level 1 and level 2. I know Cliff House has 3 levels total, right? Well, I mean, it's 2 living spaces, but I've got a top of wall. I've got a top of wall, right? Let's just pop that open really quick. Forward. So I've got level 1, level 2, and top of wall, right? So let's go ahead and add in one more level. So in any of your elevation views, you can do this, and it's going to add it to everything. I'm just going to select that level 2. I'm going to use my copy tool, and I'm going to move that up. And I left click first on level 1, second click on level 2 to offset that exactly 10 feet vertically. And since level 3 isn't something you exist on, I would rename this, and I'm doing that. I'm left clicking, oh dear. Left clicking once on level 3, then left clicking again on the level 3 name, and I'm going to rename that to TO for top of walls. So with that, I can now go to any of my walls here, and what I'm going to do to select all of those walls, you've got a couple of options. I can lasso all of them, I can select one, and then I can shift or control click each one individually. Or again, what I want you to get in the habit of doing inside of Revit is the tab button. So tab is selection options. If I hover over one wall and hit tab, its next guess for what I might want to select is all the walls, right? So I can hover over, tab, left click to pick all of the walls. You'll find yourself doing those kind of things often once you learn the tool set. So from here, my top constraint can go from unconnected to level 1, or not level 1, level 2. And now all of those walls run to the top of level 2. Cool. Now what's nice about that is, if I go back to my elevation, if level 1 to level 2 is actually 12 feet, this is going to work exactly like my dimensions in plan. Those things are connected. So I can use my dimension strings to change level 2 to 12 feet, top of walls to 24 feet, and those walls are connected. It's going to move with it, which is a really nice sort of feature to make those things stick and move together. Okay, so let's go back to my plan view and let's add a few things into this. So if I go back to level 1, the next thing down the list are doors. Okay, so putting in a door, again, it's going to bring up my default door properties. This is a 36-inch by 84-inch door is the default, which is a really weird default, you guys. Again, Revit does some weird stuff. It has forever. 36 inches should be your default width. Really, the best default height is 80 inches. It's a 6'8" door. That's 80 inches, isn't it? Yeah, it's 80 inches. Okay. So again, I'm going to ask you guys, same thing that we did with the wall, with the walls to develop a new type. I'm just going to go edit type and duplicate. Edit type and duplicate. Under this, we are going to rename that 36 by 80, which is a 3068 door. So again, regionally speaking, so in other words, if you practice within a 500-mile radius of our school, that's going to be your default door type that you usually put in. It's a 30 by 68. Meets all the ADA accessibility requirements, and it's a standard height. But, you know, I can make that whatever height, whatever width I need to, okay? As long as it's a door that you can purchase. So with that, I'm going to say OK. Oh, it's already in use. That's new. 36 by 80. They finally put one in for us. I'm just going to change it from a duplicate to just reselecting 36-inch by 80-inch. Nice. Well done, Revit. Okay, so with that, I'm just going to say OK. So we've got a 36-inch by 80. A wall or a door is always going to be nested to a wall. I can't just place a door out in the middle of nowhere. Right? Doors have to go in walls in the software. So anywhere that I'm hovering over a wall, you're going to see it's going to put that door in. So I'm just going to put it here. Again, if you remember, residential doors swing in, commercial doors swing out on your exterior perimeter. So always try and lock that into your head. Once I get a door placed, I can use these little buttons to change both the hand of the door, so in other words, where you're grasping it, and its swing, not its swing direction, but whether it's swinging in or out of the space. As I place those, if you'll notice, it is putting all those things in 3D as well, because that's what it should be doing. And yeah, you can zip through those things super, super fast. Okay. How these things get drawn. Let's change one thing really quick on these walls, especially to help the walls jump off the page. So I'm going to select my wall. Should have done this before doors. Sorry. I'm going to select my 5.5-inch wood framed wall, and I want you guys to scroll down. I guess it's going to be under Edit Type. Edit Type. And then scroll down to Fill Pattern. Right, so especially if you've had me in studio, you've heard me yell about 1,000 times over. Please take a pencil and poche the inside of your walls. It's going to help them read on the page. It's going to help communicate what's solid and what's void. Okay, so we can set that up in Revit really, really easily. It is called Coarse Scale Fill Pattern. So if I select that, click the 3 little dots, I can say I need that to be a solid fill, and OK. Next, right down here, fill color. Black works okay-ish. For me, I would rather see you guys do medium gray, and OK, and OK. And immediately, every single wall that is of that 5.5-inch wood framing wall type now will carry that interior hatch pattern. You could set that to black, and then it would be a solid black. In other words, I drew it with a great big Sharpie. And that works as well. Personally, I prefer the gray because it shows outside edge, and guts. Right? It's a little bit easier to annotate, put some additional drawing over the top of those kind of things. If I have a solid black wall, it's difficult to draw in additional detail if we need to. Okay, so from there, last thing I'm going to cover today, and then we'll start similar vein on Wednesday, rounding out these things and start transferring the method of building on top of Cliff House, is windows. So if I go to window, so the default window, there's a really good default list. Academically speaking, when you're putting in your basic windows, stick with this fixed window type. Right? This is a single pane fixed window. If you want it to be operable, just label it as this window can open and close. Right? When you get into the profession, go to the more advanced windows. Often, like if you're working with a window manufacturer, they will send you their Revit catalog of windows. So you're inputting their exact window. Academically, don't. Just stick with the simple stuff so that way you're not getting caught up in ridiculously complex window models. Okay? So the default window are these, they're pretty small actually, 36 by 48. I can again click anywhere along the wall. A point to note, windows 99 times out of 100, they don't sit with the glass to the inside like that. If I select that window, they sit to the glass with the glass to the outside. Okay, so if you don't want to look like a newbie, get the glass pushed further to the outside. Really simple reason, less to weatherproof. Okay, every now and then you've got a specific design reason to push it to the inside, but know what you're doing to the owners, right? You just made it a much more difficult window to maintain. If I look at those in 3D, it has created a default height up. So a default sill height of 3 feet. On any of my 3D views, I can just drag those around and put it wherever. I can use my dimensions to move them wherever. But the other thing that I can start to do is I can select one of those windows and go to Edit Type and Duplicate. Same thing that I was doing with walls, same thing that I was doing with doors. I can simply say that wants to be an 8-foot by 8-foot monster-sized window. And do realize that the structural integrity of glass does exist. 10 by 12 is a super expensive window and about as big as you can get. right, for a standard, like, normal window. There are ways to go larger, but we're getting exponentially more expensive in doing so. 10 by 12 is about the biggest piece of glass that you can get that is insulated. Okay, so let's do 8 by 8. I'm going to say okay. So that's only a name. The only thing that I've changed with that is the name. I can come down and say my height of the window is 8 feet. My width of the window is 8 feet. I'm not going to worry about the default sill height because I'm going to move it around anyway. And that gives me an 8 foot by 8 foot window. Cool. And now that window is in my list, right? So there's my 8 by 8 at the top. So the other important thing to note in Revit, so this is my parting thoughts, and then we regroup Wednesday. Nothing really due between now and Wednesday, okay? Other than getting caught up if you don't have the base created. At any point in time, if I have a window in my scene, right? I can select that window. I can come back to my menu and change it to 8 by 8. Okay, those models are made to be dynamic. At any point in time, I can select all of my walls and say all of those walls actually should be exterior brick and CMU. All of those things change dynamically. Because if we go back to thinking about our custom components and those little purple lines, okay, these walls are also defined by those little purple lines. And everything is just stacked up on top of them. Okay, so if I select this wall and click Edit Profile, that pulls me back down to those purple lines. Exactly what we had in custom components. It uses the exact same mode of thinking, the exact same method. In fact, I can edit that profile. Like I can put a new opening, and like that, I still have to have a closed loop, exactly like my custom components. So this is 2 closed loops, so you can think of it as a square donut. If I green check box that, I now have an opening in that wall. Cool, so all this stuff starts to link together. That's it for today, y'all. Make sure you're caught up. If this stuff went way over, like what the what, tinker around with it. I would also really suggest, as you guys get into your next studio projects, again, not using Revit as your key design tool, but use it as a tool to help you organize your work, especially in terms of dimensions and area. Okay? It's a super, super useful tool to do those things. Print it out at the scale that you're going to be working at, 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, 1/16 inch. Use that as an underlay.